Hello, hello, hello. I am Zachary Fenell, professionally a branch services clerk and branch services assistant substitute at Cuyahoga County Public Library. Outside of work, I am the Cerebral Palsy vigilante, Zachary Fenell. The following video is footage from a presentation I gave earlier this year at a local author event. Enjoy. Off Balance is about my teen. It's a teen memoir about feeling embarrassed about being different and having a disability, to learning to embrace my disability as a part of who I am. If you've got a green face mask on, eye mask, I think that's pretty much embracing it. And so it's that journey. Slow and cerebral is, so in addition to having cerebral palsy, I've done a couple of marathons, the Towpath Marathon, and slow and cerebral is my journey. I never thought I would be a marathoner just because of the fact that I have CP, the way I walk, just the different factors. I'm like, I couldn't do a marathon, it would be unreasonable. And again, I'm about to get into my first point, and that will kind of explain how I went from unreasonable to accomplishing the unreasonable. And my first takeaway, I hope you all will take away with you today, is to surround yourself with the right people. And I can use both from content from Soul and Cerebral inside my book, as well as from just my writing endeavors to kind of illustrate each of these points. So for slow and cerebral, doing a marathon, I thought it was an unreasonable thing for me to do. And I had one friend though who kept persisting. My friend James kept persisting. No, because I did a half marathon, and in my mind I was like, that's where I peak. I CP. This is with the way I walk, my balance. This is about as far as I'm going to be able to get. Half marathon. That's my peak. James, on the other hand, kept insisting, when are you going to do a marathon? When are you going to do a marathon? Annie, you know James, so you know how he can be. And so finally, I said, I'll do a marathon if you do it with me. And he's all right. And he registered, and I was waiting for him to call. I was like calling his bluff. I'm like, okay, then let's do it. And then he registered a couple months later, and off we went with that. And then in addition, to get to the point, surround yourself with the right people. As writers, it's important to surround yourself with the right people as well, so you can grow and learn. As I said, I was intimidated. I'm like, how do I even do an ebook? Working at the library connected me to really start being a regular at the library as well in my off time, as especially at the South Euclid branch where I work, is doing going to events at the Writers Center, and through connections I've made, I was able to, I'm at this point, and that's, I surrounded myself with the right people. A lot of times, surrounding yourself with the right people involves putting yourself in a certain situation. With James, our friendship really started because we were both section editors at Notre Dame College on the student newspaper, and we had a bond that grew from there. And mentioning the Writers Center, the wonderful woman who runs that is Lori Kinser. If she didn't have the Writers Conference today at the library, I'm sure she would be here. And just from connecting, Lori helped me connect with Dante, and Dante has his own, he's self-published 7 books himself. He's got, I say self-published, but he also has found his own publishing company, Dirty Truth Publishing, and he's the co-author of Wayne Dawson's book, The Seeds of Greatness Are Within You. And so just talking to Dante motivates me. Just talking to, the feeling's mutual, where we both motivate each other and then walk away from a conversation. We're just ready to take our efforts to another level. In addition to that first takeaway of surrounding yourself with the right people, and this kind of goes into the library thing. I'll start with the library here too. Control what you can control. One of the hardest parts about doing something that is so time intensive, whether that is completing a marathon, training for a marathon, or publishing a book, is where you're going to find the time for it. Especially once you have, when I started the library, I was working 15 hours a week. As I moved up in the library, all of a sudden I found myself working anywhere between 32 to 40 hours a week. So finding time to publish a book, and write and publish a book, control what you can control, and setting reasonable goals. So for me, that I would always either do a word count goal where I want to get 500 words done today, or I would do I'm going to write for an hour, and then split that up into 15-minute intervals. And to make sure controlling what I can't necessarily control my schedule at work, but I can wake up at 6:45 instead of 7:20, have breakfast, sit down for 15 minutes at 7:15, write. At 8 o'clock, sit back down, write for another 15 minutes, and then go to work. And when I come home, I'm like, I already got half of my goal for the day met. And that builds momentum and keeps you going. So it's finding whatever obstacles might be in your way, finding a way to work through them and finding out how you can control the situation. But before I can even talk about doing a marathon, one of my biggest challenges with having cerebral palsy is I do not drive. With the way my leg is, I would need hand controls, and I just don't trust my hand-eye coordination. So I don't drive that. And I didn't really feel like I had friends who would be like, oh yeah, let's go do a 5K. And so early on when I'm like trying to do races, I'm like, how am I going to get there? Like I could look up at Hermes or Greater Cleveland XC and see like, oh, there's a whole bunch of races, but it's like, how am I going to get there? And that's when you had to control what you can control. I reframed it to the one I like to celebrate my birthday with friends. One year I was like, Annie, remember? I'm like, hey, there's a 3-mile walk downtown. Like, let's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's go do that. And so I had and figuring, it's my birthday. My friends, if they want to spend it with me, they can't be like, no, thanks. It's like a happy birthday. So I used that as an opportunity. And then the first 5K I did that was timed. My brother Nick, he's right over there next to my parents. So again, VIPs in the house. Nick he works in hospice now. In many ways, he does, as a cerebral palsy vigilante, I think of myself as fighting the injustices caused by cerebral palsy stereotypes and misconceptions. Nick has an interest in death that there's a lot of fear, a lot of negative emotion when it comes to death. Nick has that passion to kind of dispel that. And so very similar, so when I saw that Lakeview Cemetery was doing a 5K I run through history, I went to Nick, I'm like, hey, this would be a fun thing to do together, and brothers, friends, hang out. And it was being able to reframe that. And once I started doing that 3-mile walk, that 5K with Nick, all of a sudden it's like my parents have both done different walks with me. We've become fixtures at the Run Through History almost every year, and minus the years I did the actual towpath marathon because it kind of was right after the marathon, and I wasn't running to go do a 5K after I did 26.2 miles the week before. So it's controlling what you can control. And then finally, I wanted to talk about, and I can't believe I had to look at my notes because I say this all the time in my blog posts and my YouTube videos. Don't blend in, blend out. Being different and you can make that an asset for you however you can. Off balance is, in addition to off balance and slow and cerebral, I actually had written and self-published a third book called Rock Realities. I interviewed different independent musicians, put it together, was selling it as an ebook, and it was a failure. It flopped. It sold a couple of copies, but there wasn't any kind of, it wasn't the way, it didn't generate word of mouth, and it didn't generate discussion the way Off Balance and Slow and Cerebral has. And the reason for that is because the Slow and Cerebral and Off Balance, I'm writing about my life, I'm writing about what I know that no one else can really, from my perspective, share with you what I have to say. So it's what makes me different that's allowing me to blend out. It's basically standing out. When you think about just, a lot of times we think of it as, oh, I'm going to stick out, and that's a bad thing. Don't think of it as sticking out. Think of it as standing out. When you're standing out, you're excelling at something. So that is where you want to really have your mind frame, is trying to finding that way to make your difference into an asset. And Slow and Cerebral, I never become a marathoner. By mile 15, they started, after mile 15, they started taking down the mileage sign. So from mile 16 through 26, I had no idea in the course where I was. And I think they were waiting for me to quit. I think they were expecting me to quit, but it was just that concept, not knowing of where to, I wasn't, so I had that point where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. But a newspaper article ran that day in the Plain Dealer about me doing the marathon. Over 300 people did the marathon that day. But because I'm different, because my story stood out, blended out, the newspaper had done an article on me, and that really helped feed my second win. And I actually would like to share an excerpt from chapter 24, I believe, Alert the Media.